This is the final fight to see who sits atop the 2022 NFL Game of Thrones.
Give me everything you got. Yeah. Everything you got. Believe in each other. Fly around. Let's find a way to win the football game.
Hey, welcome back to About That. This Sunday is a big day, right? After a long, grueling NFL season, two teams are going to be battling it out at Super Bowl 57. Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. Now, this year's matchup features two dominant teams, both finishing as number one seeds in their respective conferences. But the game is also making headlines for another reason. So for the first time in the NFL's 100-plus year history, it will feature two black starting quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts.
We couldn't have two better guys representing on this big stage. Today is February 1st, the beginning of Black History Month. And next Sunday, Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts will write their own trailblazing chapter by becoming the first black quarterbacks to face off in the Super Bowl.
And just to underline why this is such a milestone, consider how rare it is just to even have one black quarterback starting a Super Bowl. So we're on 57, right? Two starting quarterbacks per game, that's 114 opportunities. Only 7 black quarterbacks have ever had the honor, and Patrick Mahomes is one of them from previous Super Bowls. So Doug Williams, 1988, Steve McNair in 2000, Donovan McNabb in 2005, Colin Kaepernick in 2013, Russell Wilson in 2014 and 2015, Cam Newton in 2016, and yes, Patrick Mahomes in 2019 and 2020. And by the way, only 3, so Williams, Wilson, and Mahomes have ever won. Sunday's game will guarantee a 4th.
Yeah, I mean, to be on the world stage and have two black quarterbacks starting in the Super Bowl, I think it's special.
Yeah, I think it's history. I think it's something that's worthy of being noted, and it is history.
Okay, so it's pretty clear that this is a big moment, right? But let's also look at the achievement in context, because the NFL is still far from being a racially equitable league. There are 32 teams in the NFL. However, only one is owned outright by a person of color. That's Shahid Khan, who owns the Jacksonville Jaguars. There are 2 other teams that feature co-owners of color. We should mention that. The Buffalo Bills, co-owned by Kim Bagula, and the Denver Broncos with co-owners Melody Hobson. She's married to Star Wars director George Lucas. Lewis Hamilton, he's a Formula One race car driver, and former U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. But now let's look at coaching. Of the 32 teams, only 6 have head coaches of color right now. And it's been that way for a while. Let me show you what I mean. And let's see, what's the best way to set this up? So we could do people of color here, and we'll do white people there, draw 2 lines. And we were talking about coaches, right? So let me write coaches here. So according to the NFL's own diversity and inclusion report, from 2012 to 2021, so like a 9-year period, only 13 people of color were hired as head coaches compared to 58 white coaches hired over that same period of time. And it's a similar story for general managers, GMs. 33 people were white over that period of time, only 8 people of color. Again, that 9-year period. Now, the NFL does have what's called the Rooney Rule, and they introduced it in 2003, so this is like 20 years ago, saying that NFL teams must interview at least one minority candidate for head coaching positions. And it's since been expanded to include other coaching and coordinator positions as well. But what about on the field? So a 2021 report from the Institute of Diversity and Ethics in Sports found that 71% of players in the NFL were black, which seems like a pretty high number in terms of representation, right? But what positions do those players play? Well, let's look at quarterbacks, for example. So there were 64 QBs that started at least one game this season, and that's including guys, that filled in because of injuries or backups that won a starting job partway through the year. Of those 64, only 20 were players of color, which you can do the math, leaves 44 who were white. So this is only like 31%. When remember, black players make up a way bigger part of the total player base. And only 11 of those 20 players of color played more than half the season for their team. So I want to hash out just how much progress the league is really making here. And joining me to do that, Sportsnet host, writer, podcaster extraordinaire, Donnovan Bennett joining us. Hey, Donnovan, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, good, good. So, here's what I'm wondering. Do the stats paint the full picture, or is it actually the case that black players on the field are treated differently than white players?
There's no question they're treated differently. To be a black quarterback specifically, you have to be exceptional. We'll get to equality when there's a bunch of bad black quarterbacks just playing in the league, or average ones. And that's why I think it's something to celebrate that we have Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts in the Super Bowl. But we also have to note that they're only playing the position because they're undeniable at this point. Look at the middle of the field: quarterback, center, middle linebacker, safety. Those positions historically have been white players, players who lead.
Right, and these are leadership positions
yes,
on the field, yeah.
Just like coaching.
Right.
And so owners choose coaches who remind themselves of themselves, and coaches choose quarterbacks who remind themselves of themselves. We haven't seen black quarterbacks until they were undeniable, and still we're not seeing as many as we should.
That's interesting that you say that, because I was going to ask you if, seeing players like Mahomes or Hurts or Lamar Jackson, if that kind of dispels that myth, right? Like if we're actually seeing black players being appreciated, not just for their physical talent, right, but for their minds.
Well, it's funny because I watch on Sundays, and I'm very intentional about what I hear about those quarterbacks. And you hear about their athleticism often. Yeah. You don't hear about Mahomes' toughness. You don't hear about Jalen Hurts' acumen and his grace with leadership. And I think that robs them of some humanity, and it reinforces the stereotypes, even though they're in the role, that they're treated differently. Jalen Hurts not long ago was asked to work out as a wide receiver and a running back coming into the league. An anonymous scout in an article this offseason said Patrick Mahomes plays street ball football. So these are guys at the top of the sport, MVP candidates in the Super Bowl. But still, we look at them differently because of the color of the skin.
There was a prototype for a long time of what a quarterback should be in the NFL, and part of that truly was what a quarterback should look like. So you got a guy with a big arm, and he's got the square jaw, and he's got really good leadership traits, and a lot of times that would be a person with white skin as well. And now we're at a point in the NFL where we see two quarterbacks who maybe have a different skill set than what the actual prototype is, that have become the new prototype.
And as you say, the pressure on them, they have to be among the best of the best to be able to occupy that position.
But I think that's life for many people that are BIPOC in, really competitive roles. But I do think, actually, that competition changed all of this. The reason that the NFL started to integrate in terms of black players is because the AFL started to do it, and they were losing talent. The reason that we see black quarterbacks is because the first time there was two black quarterbacks in the Grey Cup in the CFL was 1981, 42 years ago. And so certainly when you see Warren Moon breaking records, the NFL has no choice but to allow him, into the party. Not equal, but there. And still, we've had some progress. Of the last 7 years, 3 of the last 7 MVPs have been black quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. And this year, there will be another one between Mahomes or Hurts. But there's only one black QB in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Warren Moon. So we still have so far to go.
Can I ask you, so a little while ago I mentioned the Rooney Rule, right? Which is, like a way of forcing teams to consider minority candidates in coaching positions. But and I see your body language, so I guess I can guess what you're about to say. But I guess it just struck me as something that it does go beyond talk, right? And it's action to an extent. But obviously, it doesn't go the whole 9 yards. But you tell me, is that a sign of good things to come? Do we need to see more things like that?
Well, we can't force rich, powerful, and often white men to do anything that they don't want to do. And the Rooney Rule really hasn't moved the needle. We've already had 2 black head coaches coach each other against each other in a Super Bowl, but yet the numbers of black coaches across the league has not gone up. So I don't think that the fact that we have 2 black quarterbacks in the Super Bowl is going to change things dramatically.
You bringing up white dudes that are not qualified and giving them jobs over these black candidates, which makes it worse because it shows there's no criteria.
We could put end racism in the end zones. That's not going to change things. For me, what'll change things is when the decision makers start to look like the 71% of the workforce on the field.
Right, and so you're talking about head office, right? You're talking about GMs, you're talking about owners.
I think it starts with ownership, right? I think it starts with that leadership, but you need to fill the table. Starts with media as well and broadcasters. Having a much more diverse outlook on how we hire, how we talk about the athletes, certainly I think would change the projection because, listen, I'm 5'9" and 3/4. I probably wasn't going to be a quarterback growing up. But the point is, I didn't even think of being a quarterback. I saw myself in running backs because the vast majority of them were black. So, for our kids to grow up, hopefully they see a Tua or a Mahomes and they say, okay, well, why can't I play quarterback? The highest earning position and the one that funnels itself into coaching. So these things are all interlinked.
Who wins on Sunday, Donnovan? I got you there.
Well, you know what? I've often found myself watching Super Bowl, like just cheering for a black quarterback because I know what the headlines might be if they lose. Now I've got great options, but I would be remiss if I bet against Patrick Mahomes, right? Many people have done so. Not many people have bet right. So I think the Chiefs win.
Donnovan Bennett, always good to have you in the studio. Thank you so much.
Always my pleasure.